So this week's been a bit of an adventure for the podcast.
To say the least.
We spent probably 2 or 3 hours, seems fair.
Grand total, yeah.
Between drive time and messing around with the TV, all of that stuff. Long story short, Death of Stalin was not working on our TV.
Yeah, now, do we know why? Like, has it started working now?
It is now working. I think I just had to reset the Wi-Fi and then also update the smart TV.
Yeah, so it was a struggle to find. We do everything last minute, so that was part of the problem. But then...
In my defense, I tried to watch it 3 or 4 times and you kept pushing it off.
Very true. Sitting down to watch a movie is a lot of effort. But regardless, I did look it up online to try to find it, and it was only at a store about 45 minutes from where we live.
Yes, it was a 45-minute drive to buy a DVD copy.
Yeah, for like $22.
For $20 that we then got home, and then it had reset the system, and it started working again, and I could have downloaded it for $3.
Yeah.
Shoot me in the face.
Yeah. So basically, we need sponsors for the podcast because apparently we pay
Facts.
$22. So
the things we do for our fans.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm Tyler.
I'm Shay.
And this is Cinematically Correct.
And this week was your movie.
This week was my choice, and it was Death of Stalin. This is a pseudo pick. It's not a fan pick because I don't think my sister listens to the podcast. But it was recommended by my sister because she thought I would like the movie. Mm-hmm. And based off the trailer, I was in. I was hooked. I was like, that's totally my jam.
Yeah. Now, I mean, a lot of you guys are new listeners from what I can see from Podcoin. So what's up, Podcoin people? Because I'm so excited about that app. But anyways, Tyler is a crazy history buff. So oftentimes we do history movies because he's obsessed and can't stop himself.
And even non-history movies, I do a minute or two of some kind of tangentially related history just because I can't help myself.
Yeah, so we do have History Minute every podcast. So when I heard about this movie, granted, I knew nothing about it. I am not a history buff at all. Right. But I figured it was going to be right up your alley. And yeah, like part of the reason I was delaying watching it was because of the history. But anyway, would we like to go into the brief synopsis?
Brief synopsis.
Brief synopsis.
Why do you look surprised? We do this every podcast.
I'm not surprised.
I apparently shocked you.
No, I was leaving a brief pause so I could cut in the bumper. You ruined the illusion. Okay, brief synopsis. The movie's about the Soviet Union, and it's about Stalin killing a whole bunch of people, which is historically accurate. He was a bit of a monster. And he dies.
Killed about 40 million people under his regime.
I actually looked up the numbers according to the
So did I.
new information after they released the archive. It's only about 6 to 9 million.
Oh, only. No big.
Well, he's also the person that came up with the kill one person that's murder, kill a million. It's a statistic quote.
Okay.
Regardless, Stalin is killing a whole bunch of people. And no one's really happy in the Soviet Union. Then Stalin dies, and the movie is about the struggle for the remaining leadership of the Soviet Union trying to seize power for themselves.
Right. Now, to clarify again, even though we already mentioned it, this was a dark comedy. So it was not meant to be serious. It is fiction. It is based on real events, but it is fiction.
It is historical satire. It is very dark, but I think that's in large part because the material is very bleak.
Yeah, so I actually went and did a little bit of like research on what exactly a black comedy is, because for the most part, I really enjoy dark humor. Like that's just, I think you would even agree that's my type of humor. But I didn't find that here. And so I wanted to know what I was missing. And from what I saw, dark comedy doesn't necessarily mean the type of humor that you and I would think of when we think of black humor or dark humor. It just means that they're making light of a situation that would normally be considered serious, sad or grotesque or right. So I think that this is considered a dark comedy basically because it is centered around the death of Stalin. I don't
and
really
the
feel
death of millions of innocent people for no reason.
Yeah, but beyond that, I don't really see the real dark humor. I mean, there were a few things here and there, like when Stalin passed away and they said, one of the guys said something like, oh, so I'm the one that's going to lay in the piss or whatever, like to pick him up. Things like that, I guess, would be considered dark humor.
Or the guards talking outside the door when they hear him collapse and they don't check on him because they were scared for their lives. They're like, shut up, you idiot, you're going to get a shot. That is probably a conversation that they had at the time.
So I'm sure that is true, but I just felt that it wasn't dark humor in the way that I would have expected it to be.
I mean, there were a few funny lines here and there, but overall it wasn't a laughing type movie.
No. It was more like
it's trying to make fun of a horrible circumstance, and while they made it less horrible in terms of you're not sitting here going, oh God, I just need to kill myself, it didn't have a whole lot of humor.
Right. And there wasn't a lot of jokes where I was like, oh my God, they can't believe they went there. Like, they really didn't seem to toe the line that much, and maybe that was out of respect. Maybe it was, I don't know.
I mean, it can't be that respectful. It was banned in Russia.
It was, in fact, in January 2018, I believe. January 23rd, 2018, to be exact. But yeah, so that was one of the things that surprised me about the movie, because I was going into it thinking it was going to be, like, funny, but I didn't find it funny.
That is the weird part of it, because when I watched the trailer, I was chuckling to the trailer. I was like, oh, this is going to be totally my thing. And then I get to the movie, and it's a bit of a slog.
Right.
It's a bit of a, I understand what they're doing, but at the same time, I would like a little bit more levity in the movie. Right.
Okay, so, I mean, there are a few actors that we know. Well, I mean, one that I know. I think you know more.
Steve Buscemi. There was Jeffrey Tambor, the tall, awkward guy. The leader that took over after Stalin.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. I know who he is because I know he's the one whose wife came back, right? That's...
No. He's the gentleman that is... he's in a lot of TV shows.
Oh, I thought he was the one whose wife came back, because I recognize the guy whose wife came back.
Okay. The General Zukov, I think his name is something Isaacs, where he was the villain in Harry Potter. He's basically the villain in every movie. Mm-hmm. So he played Lucius Malfoy and a bunch of other characters. I think he was the bad guy in The Patriot with Mel Gibson. But there were a lot of good actors in here, and I think it was, for the most part, fairly well acted.
Yeah, I mean, Steve Buscemi, I adore. Yes. Obviously, everybody is going to talk about the same story that we all talk about with him, that he was a firefighter, volunteer firefighter for 9/11, and basically didn't want anyone to acknowledge that he was an actor. That will forever go down for me as, like, one of the best things that I've heard of an actor doing. That's just amazing. But I have to say, I didn't find him funny in this movie.
No,
I find him funny as a rule. Like, he's just a funny guy.
He's very funny. Like, Armageddon, he was funny.
Yeah. He's just funny. He just is. Right. But I didn't laugh at him in this movie.
I mean, there were a couple scenes where you're like, okay. And it was...
Okay, there were a few scenes where I was kind of like, oh, haha. But there was no, like, belly laugh or, like, anything like that in this movie. It just...
I did not at all.
No, it just didn't happen. So, okay. I
don't know where to go from there. I mean, everything about this movie was well done and tastefully done, to my understanding, in terms of there was no, like, just crass humor, really. There was
No, there wasn't. Okay, so, I mean, since we both really didn't like the movie, it is tough to find things to talk about. But to start with, I did want to talk about the beginning scene. So, they, at the beginning of the movie, they...
are in a concert hall.
They're at a concert hall, and basically Stalin calls or ends up on the phone with one of the people there and says he wants a recording of the show. And the show has already happened, so they have to now bring everybody back in and basically force everyone to play the show, even though some people did not want to do it.
Right.
So that actually happened in real life.
No, people were afraid for their lives. I can't imagine it living in the United States, but these are the kind of horrible dictatorship regimes where there's secret police that will pull you out of bed and shoot you in the middle of the night. I mean, honestly, I think the movie did a very good job of playing up that actual fear for your life in the you have to get everything right Otherwise, you get shot in the face.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So, I really don't know where to go from there, other than they get
That
the
is
recording.
the third time you've said that.
I know. This movie was a bit of a meandering path. I mean, it was very scheduled and metered out, but I don't have a whole lot to talk about other than what actually happened in the movie, which is not what we usually do.
Well, right. But I mean, I think it's important to go through at least some of the scenes, especially ones that were based on reality. I think that's important to at least point out that there were quite a few scenes that were based on reality. Right. One thing I did want to note about the actors was that none of them had Russian accents. The director chose to do that. And I honestly didn't even notice. Like, I didn't even... And normally that is something that... I don't know if you guys have listened to previous podcasts before. I've complained about music that have been out of place. I complain when accents are off. That's something that bothers me. And in this movie, it didn't stick out.
They weren't Boston accents.
Maybe, but it
because
just because
that's the only accent you complain about.
Maybe, but regardless, it didn't stick out to me at all.
I am very shocked. It hit me in the face. I just couldn't. I couldn't get over it personally. They're all talking with Yorkshire or English accents or American accents. It was a hodgepodge nightmare of things, and it took me out of the movie. Well, I think that was one of my main problems with the movie is that they didn't even try to make it sound Russian.
See, maybe it's because I am not super familiar with Russian history. I mean, I know enough, but I don't know. Like, I'm not, like, totally engrossed in it. So it's not something that I needed. I don't know. It's strange to me that it didn't bother me.
Well, that leads me into a point that I didn't want to talk about. So Russia's a huge country. So
is it? I didn't know.
The Soviet Union was even larger because it had all the extra countries that they just kind of took because they could. Which they actually do have accents in Russia and in the Soviet Union, just like the United States does, which I didn't actually really think about. So we have the Southern accent, the Boston accent, all of those things.
Of course they do.
I know. Having said that, obviously now, but that never occurred to me because when someone speaks Russian, I just hear Russian. I don't hear a distinction. So when someone speaks French, I don't hear a distinction. When someone speaks any language that's not English, I just hear that without any kind of understanding.
So for those of you who don't know, my sister is adopted from Russia. And my parents actually had to go there to get her. And they were told what type or dialect of Russian they were going to be going into so that they could kind of prepare themselves for being able to speak at the orphanage and things like that. So I think that was just kind of brought to my attention like a long time ago. So that kind of is...
Well, I think it's really just I don't have an ear for their accents because I can't understand what they're saying regardless. And I know that makes me sound horrible, but it's just I don't fluently speak any language, really.
Not even English.
Thank you.
Oh, well, I mean, spelling anyway.
All right. So I was really thrown by that because if it wasn't in English and it wasn't a hodgepodge of different things, I wouldn't have considered that. Because it just would have sounded Russian to me and it all would have sounded
But I have to say that I'm glad that they didn't do a subtitle movie. Now, there are subtitle movies that I like. Train to Busan is the first one that comes to mind. So there are...
Mother.
Right. So there are ones that I like. But as a general rule, I prefer not to have to do subtitles. One, because I never wear my glasses. But two, because I find that it's very difficult if you so much as like look away from the screen for a second to really stay.
Well, you miss one line of dialogue and then the whole scene doesn't make sense.
Right. So I'm not a big fan of that. I tend to be kind of all over the place when I watch a movie. I don't want to have to be like attached to the screen. I don't enjoy that. So I am glad that they didn't do that. So I guess that's a plus on this movie because I'm going to have a hard time finding pluses. So I'll take them where I can get them.
I mean, that's fair. So I love the scene when they're talking about what to do with Stalin after he's in the bed and he's been laying there.
Okay, so he's skipping ahead a little bit. To clarify, after this happens, one of the girls that did not want to play the show, I forget her name right now because she really wasn't a big part in the movie, but she sends a note to Stalin with the recording basically saying that he ruined everything.
You killed all my family, I hope you die.
Right. And then he has a cerebral hemorrhage and eventually dies. So then there's this whole big show of like, how do we move the body? What do we do? He had peed himself, and
he's been sitting there for God knows how long because no one checked on him.
Right.
And
there's just like this whole thing, and
we've killed all the doctors. Like that was
we've killed all the good doctors,
which
was a reference to the fact that he killed a bunch of Jewish doctors.
Well, he killed a lot of people, so I mean, it just stands to reason. He killed so many people that at times there was no one to.
Yeah, but this was a reference to an actual event where he specifically sought out and killed Jewish doctors. Yes. So, yes, he did kill a lot of people, but this was a reference to an actual like direct event that he did.
I love the line where they're talking, and then they said, "If he recovers, it's a good doctor. If not, he won't know," which was funny. It was one of the few funny lines. Really, for me in the movie,
right?
And then just they're lying in bed, and it's a who's on first because he's pointing to the painting and all of that, and it's just a huge miscommunication. They're like, well, maybe the Russian people are the milk, maybe blah blah blah, maybe you're the insert expletive. It was a massive communication snafu, and I find that amusing, and it leads me to one other thing that I want to talk about. Where I didn't realize or put much thought into how you say something determines the intention behind it.
I have no idea what that means.
So there was a scene later in the movie, but this also plays into it because there's the miscommunication. They can't understand what he's saying. Where he says, no problem, and then he retracts and says, no problem.
So you're talking about inflection.
Inflection, right. So this is a play on an actual thing where in Russian there's a winged sentence or something like that.
Okay.
Where they give the example, pardon, period, impossible to be executed. So impossible to kill a person.
So pardon. It's impossible.
Pardon, impossible to execute.
Okay.
And then if you change that to pardon, impossible to be executed, very different meaning. And I've never really thought about that.
You've never considered inflection.
Well, I've just never given a real thought that it has that kind of impact, really.
So you've never seen like those signs that they put on the road that says like, what was it? Like, Grandpa ate the dog or something. I don't know. I can't remember the sentences, but they change it so it's like, Grandpa's been eaten.
It's the extra comma that spaces it out where it's cooking my children... Or things that I love, cooking my children, and then my dog, or something, and then it's just
cooking
you don't
my
put
children.
Yeah,
right. But there's signs for that, and there's like these big billboards, and it says right underneath it, punctuation matters.
Well, I understand that punctuation matters, but this is one of the few instances where you can say that and it's all ha-ha funny, but that can actually happen. Like in horrible dictatorships, phrasing matters.
Yes,
to a scary degree.
Phrasing generally matters. This is the difference between a history buff and an English major, I suppose.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just found it amusing. So, what else do you want to talk about? Because we got a few more minutes to go before I do the audience asks and History Minute.
Well, first of all, there's a few other like things that really happened in real life that we didn't mention. So I'm sure you know them all, but I feel like we should mention them because we are talking about this movie, so It's important. So one of the things is the film alludes to the 1950 plane crash that killed most of the Soviet hockey team, which happened 3 years before Stalin had died.
And they had to try to replace them short notice?
Right. So I think that would have been funnier to me if I had known it was true.
Well, I did find the humor in it because they were talking about, well, what plane crash? There was no plane crash. What are you talking about? So I did find that amusing because I had heard that story before. Right.
So I do think a lot of the things in the movie I would have found funnier if I had known they were true. And I do think that if I went back and watched it again, there are a few pieces that I might be able to pick up where I'm like, okay, that's a little bit funny. I still don't think it would be laugh out loud funny.
I would agree with you on that. I do think
I might be able to be like, oh, okay, I get where you're going with that.
I see where they're going with that.
It's like when you watch a Simpsons episode about like a topic that you know nothing about and you're like, why is everyone laughing?
Or a Family Guy episode where they just throw in references that sometimes you don't get them.
Right, but then you watch an episode where you know everything. You're like, this is the best episode ever. Because you get it. You're in on the joke. I'm not in on this joke. But
So
also,
there's that. What other things are you stealing from my History Minutes?
well, I'm purposely avoiding the one I mentioned to you for the History Minute. Are you doing that?
I have it written down,
Okay.
yes.
So the only other one that I wanted to mention was Svetlana's mother. Do you have that one down?
Where she shot herself?
Yes.
Yes.
Is that okay? Well, okay, then if you have that down. So one of the things I wanted to talk about this movie is, since it was a dark comedy, a movie that's being compared to a ton is Doctor Strangelove. I don't
Never
know.
seen it.
So me neither. Well,
Add it to the
let me
list.
qualify that. So in high school, Doctor Strangelove was one of my history teacher's favorite movie, and he made us watch it like I think 3 times. Now, granted, me being me, I don't pay attention to movies in school. That was just not my thing. I just
You could have
didn't.
stopped it. I don't pay attention to movies, full stop.
Yeah, that's probably true. Probably true.
You
But
spent
anyway,
more time on the phone during this movie than actually watching this movie.
it was so hard. But anyway, next week's movie, I promise you I'll be invested in because it's my pick. But anyway,
I see how it is. Mine's not important. Doesn't get your interest going.
I got bored. Anyway, my point was that I do remember bits and pieces of that movie being really funny. Like, really, like, one of those, like, moments where I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that just happened.
Well, it's so absurd to the point of hysterical.
Right. And
Laughter.
he
Like, it
did take time during history class to say, like, stop the movie and be like, okay, this is why this is funny. And he would explain stuff to us.
Okay.
So I would enjoy going back and watching Doctor Strangelove now that I am a little bit more knowledgeable about things and whatever. And I almost want to learn the plot of the movie prior to it so I could learn the real events. Not read anything about the movie, but the real events. And then try watching a movie like this. So then, like, maybe I could be in on a little bit more of the jokes. You know?
I mean, I think that's fair because I know the basics, but I didn't have any of the finer point details before watching this movie. And I do feel that I even lost a little bit of the understanding of things, like the flower scene, over my head.
What was the flower scene?
That it's in my.
Oh, the History Minute. Okay, so before we go into History Minute, because I feel like we're going to go from History Minute to Audience Ask to Ratings, and we're going to be out, right?
I think that's fair.
Okay. So I never do this. I'm doing it because I didn't like the movie and I need something interesting to happen in this podcast. But I never do this. But I'm about to bring up politics.
Okay.
So if anybody listens to this podcast, you guys know that I berate Tyler for any attempt to bring up politics. But I'm doing it. So blame Shay, I guess, we can do this week. But anyways, so the director of this movie is known for his dark humor, dark comedy, that kind of stuff. And I don't know if it was before he made this movie or while making this movie or what it was, but he made a tweet about a Trump movie that he was considering making. Did you read this?
I did not read this at all.
So, okay. So I thought this would be interesting to you. So this is what the tweet read. Film pitch. Trump drugged and moved to a replica White House where he carries on thinking he's governing. Millions spent on hiring actors to play his staff, senators, news, anchors, people at rallies. There you go, studios, your highest bid. So apparently, he actually got 12 offers from studios to do this movie. But he decided against doing the movie because he thought it would be too depressing and he couldn't find an ending where there would actually be any humor in it. He said it would literally just be horribly, horribly depressing. But Twitter apparently came up with a great title. Fake America Great Again. So I needed to put that out there because he does mention, there's an interview that he did. I think it's...
Well, in politics, I wrote down somewhere in my notes, this is why America has elections, because you don't want this mad dash to whoever gets into power shoots everyone else, because that's just horrible.
Right. But
thank God we have actual elections. Whether you like the elections or not, or you believe you have a voice, not the point. It is still a better alternative than someone shooting the competition.
Right. But I did, since you're changing my topic, I did want to just mention really quick
I would
that
totally watch that movie.
I know you would. I know you would. But the director did mention that while Trump was not in presidency when this movie was created, he was being sworn in when it was being cut. And he said that he found a lot of similarities between Trump and this whole situation and the way things were handled. And he said it was terrifying to him. And I did not really normally I do see those kind of connections. I didn't see it here, but
I would
when
say
after
it's
reading it
closer-
again, I see it in the person I shouldn't, and that's all I'm going to say on that. I'm sure you can pick up who I'm talking about, but I see it in a person I shouldn't, and not Stalin, because Stalin is not.
Oh, I see it in a person that I very clearly should. I see a direct parallel to what's happening in Russia currently.
Well, me too. But I will say that in this movie, Stalin is not really in it. So for me to say I can pull a comparison would be lying. That's not. I can't. There wasn't enough Stalin in this movie for me to do it. But there was a character in this movie that I could very well draw a comparison, and it's not kind, and that's what I'm going to say on that, because I can't. If I said what I wanted to say,
you're killing me. I don't understand anything of what you're saying.
But I can't do it. But you guys might pick it up over the next few minutes of this podcast. So why don't we move into the History Minute?
History Minutes. There's several.
Tyler's History Minute.
First, did you know that Stalin let his own son rot in a Nazi prisoner of war camp?
The alcoholic son?
No. He had 2 sons.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So, the story is he was captured at Stalingrad, and Stalin was very upset that his son was captured, and he had a field marshal, a German field marshal, which is basically the general of all generals.
Mm-hmm.
And they offered him a swap. They're like, we'll trade you 1 for 1. And he was quoted to have saying, where is it?
I don't know where it is. Can't help you
I
there.
wrote it down. This is
Oh boy,
awkward.
Tyler looking through his notes.
I will never give a field marshal for a lieutenant, even though it's his own son.
Wow,
which is
that's awful.
Super, super horrible. Stalin's wife shot herself after an argument.
Yes, she did. And they reference it in the movie when the daughter said, I should just shoot myself like my mother.
Right. The Beria gentleman, horrible man that would go out and cruise for women to assault. Mm-hmm. To put too fine a point on it, which is the flower scene. There's a whole long explanation about he would give them flowers so that it was quote unquote consensual.
And if they rejected the flowers, they would be punished and jailed.
And or shot. So not really consensual at all. And
by the way, I didn't notice this in the film. Apparently, I'm just oblivious to the world around me. But in the movie, Beria is killed, and he's charged with sexual assault.
right.
Apparently, they state in the movie that he was convicted of 347 or something like that sexual assaults.
Yeah.
I missed that entirely. I just thought they were kind of like making fun of like his like flirty nature, that because they did not play up the sexual assault in this movie very
Well,
much.
they did have the flower scene, and they did have a couple where he was creepy with women, but there's no way you can accurately portray that unless you shoot a whole scene about him abducting poor women.
Right. I mean, the extent to which the reality of it was far worse than what they showed in the movie.
Yes.
But so when they mentioned the number or whatever, I just kind of thought they were just being exaggerant. I bet you that was a low number based on what I read.
Oh, I don't doubt that at all. Also, the little bird comment where he made, I think that was him, where he said, little bird.
Oh, I don't remember who it was, but I know what you're talking about, yes.
It reminded me straight of Game of Thrones, which also threw me out of the whole movie, because that's part of Game of Thrones, not really related to the story. That's all I got for the History Minute.
Okay.
I have a couple random facts.
Sure, go for it.
This is based on a French graphic novel.
I did read that, and you know what? I would actually like to read the graphic novel.
It's probably
always
in
say
French.
It doesn't matter.
We'll have to find an English version because I can't read French.
Yeah, so if anybody wants to send it to us, since we had to pay $22 for the movie, you know, you can hit us up. We do have a P.O. box.
So the General Zhukov character was wearing about half the medals that he was actually supposed to be wearing.
I saw the picture of him on Reddit.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. The amount of medals that man had.
Yeah.
My gosh.
They also added a scar so that it would show that he'd been in the war, quote unquote. That's all I got for random facts.
Okay, well, that's enough
Okay.
random
So
facts,
audience
I believe.
asks, I guess.
Audience asks.
Yeah. So I will say, as usual with Audience Ask, we didn't get a lot of response. Now I'm hoping next week because the movie was popular, you guys are going to give us all of the audience asks. So if you are from Podcoin or
wherever you're listening,
wherever you're coming from, because there's been a lot of great new listeners this week, please go to Twitter at CinematicallyC. We will be posting the audience ask question. We usually post it between Saturday and Monday. It depends on when we record. But please respond and get those questions in there, because we'd really like to have this segment be more about you guys. But this week we tweeted it, we put it on Facebook, we kept sharing it, and we didn't get anything. Crickets. So
I had to resort to reaching out to my sister Lindsay, who recommended the movie, and her husband John. They watched it together, and I did get 2 questions.
Okay, well, so
it's going to be a weird change of pace. I'm going to be reading questions for the audience asks.
Yeah, this doesn't normally happen.
No, it doesn't.
So fix it next week, guys, please.
So John's question: at what point in the movie did you stop laughing? Go.
I feel awful because I don't want to say what I want to say, but I don't think I started.
I don't either, honestly. I don't remember a time where I was laughing or chuckling or like, ha ha ha, right, at all during this whole movie.
No, not at all. And now, if you guys thought this movie was funny, or you think that there may be a way that we would find it more enjoyable, I would be open to that. I'm not anti this movie or anything. I didn't see it. So tweet at us, let us know what we did wrong. Maybe, I don't know. I do feel bad, though, because this was your sister's recommend, and I wanted to like it for her.
Well, I was suckered in by the trailer, and I really thought I was going to love this movie based off the trailer.
Right.
And then I don't remember laughing at all.
Right.
Sorry, John. My sister's question. Do you think knowing more about the actual history made you more or less likely to enjoy the movie?
So, obviously, on my end, I didn't know a lot about the actual history. So, I do think that colored how much I disliked the movie, because I felt lost a lot, and I felt kind of like nothing was really funny to me because I didn't know any of it was real. So, it was just kind of like a bunch of like
absurd things happening, even though it was real absurd things happening.
Right. And I will say it reminded me a lot of Monty Python, which I know everybody loves, but I've never liked it. It's one of those movies
I'm going to bask in this moment for a while now.
I just have to say it's one of those movies that I think if you know the jokes and you understand the background, you're going to find it way funnier. But I never did, so the only jokes I could understand were the really dumb farting and bodily fluid type jokes, and that is just not my type of humor. So maybe if I went into it with a background, I could appreciate the smarter humor, but what I could appreciate was just like, oh, okay, so it's basically men being men. This is really funny. So
we're gonna table that whole nightmare of internet hatred and bile, because I can't believe you said you don't like Monty Python.
Okay, Mr. Big Trouble in Little China, don't get me started.
Monty
Game
Python is a better movie, objectively, across the board. Not the point. I understood some of the basics of the history. I've never really looked into the inner workings of the socialist and the Soviet Union governmental changes and the gulags and all of the darkness, because I knew horrible things happened. That was enough for me. But even knowing that, I felt a little bit lost, and then I was just kind of like, well, this is not really a funny movie. They're making fun of murdering people, and I guess it's absurd, but it wasn't really funny for me.
Right. No, I agree with that.
So I think knowing the history would help, but at the same time, it's a horrible history.
Yeah. So
it's kind of like, ha ha ha, Holocaust. You can't laugh at the Holocaust. You can't laugh at the millions of people dying.
Right.
So I struggled with that. Off to ratings.
Sure.
Because we're basically at the period of time. Ratings.
Reviews.
So Rotten Tomato had it at 96% Rotten Tomato, and then 77% audience score. So I think a lot of that has to do with people either not understanding it or not having the same basis. Mm-hmm. So there's a wide disparity. That's one of the widest we've seen in a while.
Right.
I'm going to rate this... I'll give it an 8.
Wow. That is a really high score.
It's a very high score because the acting was fairly decent. I don't think a lot of the jokes landed for me. But I like the fact that they did stay almost overwhelmingly fairly historically accurate on a lot of things. They hit a lot of different bullet points. They brought light to something that a lot of people aren't familiar with, I feel. So I don't know. I was interested by that, but I mean, there was no real laughing at all.
Right.
So the movie was well done. It missed the mark in terms of the comedy.
Wow. Okay.
So I'll give it an 8.
Wow. Okay. So I'm a bad person then. I was going to give it a 6.
Okay.
So the acting was great, and I appreciate that it brought light to things that I didn't already know. But I don't consider it a comedy. I didn't find it funny pretty much at all.
No, it definitely failed in that regard for me.
It didn't hold my interest. So I was more interested by doing the research and learning that way. But in the actual movie, I was more kind of like looking at the time, like, is this going to end? Because I'm bored.
Well, right. It was just you can't really laugh at millions of people die. It was...
No,
I understand where they were going with it, but they just... That's not something that is funny. It's just not.
No, it wasn't done in a way that I could kind of like take myself out of that part of it. And
it was more deadpan humor.
Right, and I do enjoy deadpan humor. I do. Dimitri Martin, I mean, I do.
Some things can be funny, but this just, I don't think it landed.
Right, no, it just didn't. So, with that being said, we do want to do more dark comedies that we would actually enjoy. So if you guys know of any, tweet them at us. We will do them at some point in life. We do have a list that's longer than Santa's good and bad list.
We do a movie once a week, and then it still gets longer. I don't understand.
Yeah, so it does. But anyways, are we ready to talk about next week's movie?
I think that's fair.
Okay, so next week's movie is my choice, which I did the audience recommends choice this time. Which I think, didn't we just do an audience recommends? Like last week, maybe? I don't know. But anyways, it is an audience recommends. So we're doing Hereditary. Or Hereditary. I don't know how to say it. Hereditary? Is that how you say it?
Hereditary.
Okay, so when we did A Quiet Place a long time ago now, you guys recommended that we do this movie. I don't know a ton about it. I did see the trailer, but it was super popular. And it came out right around the same time as A Quiet Place, I believe. So it is a horror movie. I don't know if it's on Netflix or Hulu. It's definitely on Amazon Prime. There's no way it's not. But so that's the movie we're going to be doing. So watch it before we come back. And please give us questions for next week. Please, I'm begging you. Like, please. If you need to email me right now with your questions, cinematicallycorrect@gmail.com. You can do that. You don't need to wait for my audience.
Or tweet them at you right now.
Right. You don't need to wait if you don't want to wait. Like, we just need the questions, guys. Like, I'm telling you, I'll even do an extended version if we get enough questions. I don't care. I just need them.
We'll do 4 if we get 4.
Yeah.
Rather than just 2.
Yeah, like, guys, help us out. We want to interact with you guys, and it's been so long. I feel like it's been a drought. So we need you. But anyways, so it is a horror movie. I am really excited about it, and I promise that I'm going to be so invested in that movie because that's my type of movie. That's my jam. So, anyways, do you have anything else you want to add before we close out?
I don't think I have anything else to add other than our social media. I'm now on social media.
Right, so I didn't mention that. So Tyler has actually opened up his own Twitter. So the podcast Twitter is at CinematicallyC, which I run. And now Tyler is at BlameTylerCC. And he's been tweeting kind of good, kind of not. But if you tweet at him, he will respond. I check his Twitter also to make sure that he responds to you guys. So don't worry,
I can't promise you will like the response, but
right,
I will respond for the most part.
I don't censor him like I would normally if he was through our Twitter like I was doing. So I'm sorry. But if you guys want to talk to him, you can talk to him on there. And he will be doing his best to let you know about the podcast coming up, and he'll be talking about random other things that come to his mind. So if you like his random facts throughout the podcast, you'll like his Twitter. So anyways, other than that, you can find us on Instagram at Cinematically C, on Facebook at Cinematically Corrects Listener Group.
We're never there anymore.
I don't know why I plug it, because we're never there. But if you guys ever want us to do something on there, tell us. We will. We just, nobody was really over there, so we kind of just went back to Twitter, where y'all seem to be hanging out. So that's about that. So thank you to Jake Adathis Music for our intro and outro music, and we will be back next week for Hereditary.